Welcome to Sleep Science Space. You've stepped into a quieter orbit now, away from the constant noise of the day. This is a place designed for slowing down, not shutting off, but gently easing the mind into a calmer rhythm. A place where you can rest, wander, or simply listen without needing to arrive anywhere in particular. Tonight, we're not just discussing brain scans or scientific terms. We're turning inward, exploring the subtle inner landscape where thoughts arise, memories shift, and the sense of being you quietly takes shape. Over the course of this journey, we'll move through 100 remarkable insights about consciousness, from hidden neural processes to unusual cases that challenge how awareness is usually understood. Some ideas may feel familiar, others may linger long after the sound fades. And if these slow, curious explorations become part of how you unwind, a simple like subscribe or comment helps this space remain open for others who are searching for a quieter end to their day. Consciousness, despite decades of study, still resists a single clear definition. Ask a group of researchers what it is, and you're likely to hear entirely different explanations. For some, consciousness means basic awareness, the ability to sense the world and notice internal thoughts. For others, it includes deeper layers like self reflection, memory, emotion, and the capacity to imagine what has not yet happened. Philosophers, neuroscientists, and psychologists often describe the same experience using very different frameworks. Even simple questions like whether animals, machines, or newborn infants are conscious can divide experts sharply. This lack of agreement makes consciousness unusually difficult to study. Measuring something becomes complicated when its boundaries aren't clearly defined. Despite powerful brain imaging tools and advanced computational models, no single theory has yet brought consensus. Consciousness remains one of science's most persistent mysteries, and at the same time, the most intimate one we experience every day. At the physical level, the brain itself runs on electricity, not like a machine plugged into a wall, but through delicate electrochemical signals passing between billions of neurons. Each neuron generates tiny shifts in voltage as charged particles move across its membrane, creating the complex electrical patterns that allow the brain to function. When added together, this activity produces roughly 20 watts of power, enough to light a small bulb. What's striking is not the amount of energy, but how efficiently it's used. With this modest output, the brain orchestrates every thought movement, sensation, and emotion. And even during sleep, when consciousness feels distant or fragmented, the brain never truly shuts down. It continues regulating the body, organizing memories, and preparing for the moments when awareness quietly returns. Modern computers often consume enormous amounts of energy to perform tasks that the human brain completes effortlessly in fractions of a second. Even advanced machines struggle to match the brain's ability to integrate perception, memory, emotion, and decision making all at once. This contrast highlights not only the efficiency of biological intelligence, but also how much remains unexplained about the living system quietly sustaining conscious experience. In most surgical procedures, general anesthesia creates a clean break in awareness. One moment you're present, the next, there's nothing. No passage of time, no memory, no sensation. Yet, in rare situations, this boundary fails. A small number of patients experience what's known as anesthesia awareness, briefly regaining consciousness during surgery. Some report hearing voices or feeling pressure, while others experience pain without the ability to move or speak as muscle paralyzing drugs remain active. Estimates suggest this occurs in roughly 1 to 2 cases per 1,000 surgeries involving general anesthesia. Factors such as individual metabolism, drug resistance, or insufficient dosing can increase the risk. While modern brain monitoring techniques have greatly reduced these events, they haven't eliminated them entirely. For both patients and anesthesiologists, these cases are deeply unsettling because they expose how incomplete our understanding still is of how consciousness is reliably suppressed and restored. Even more surprising, awareness doesn't always disappear the instant the heart stops beating. When circulation ceases, the brain doesn't shut down immediately. Studies of cardiac arrest have shown organized brain activity persisting for several seconds and sometimes longer after blood flow stops. In rare cases, people who were successfully resuscitated later described vivid perceptions during this window moments of clarity, visual imagery, or awareness of their surroundings while they were clinically considered dead. Scientists believe this may occur as the brain rapidly uses its remaining reserves of oxygen and glucose before electrical activity fades. These final surges of neural coordination can generate intense internal experiences, sometimes described as bright lights or expanded perception. While this doesn't suggest that consciousness continues beyond death, it does indicate that the loss of awareness is a process, not a switch, and that the brain's final moments may be far more structured than we once assumed. For a long time, a coma was assumed to mean total unconsciousness, a silent mind completely offline. But modern brain imaging has begun to challenge that assumption. In a small but remarkable number of patients, diagnosed as unresponsive scans reveal pockets of hidden awareness still quietly active beneath the surface. In carefully designed experiments, researchers asked these patients to imagine specific actions such as playing a game of tennis or walking through the rooms of their home. Though their bodies remained still, each imagined activity produced a distinct and recognizable pattern of brain activation detectable through functional MRI. By assigning one mental image to mean yes and another to mean no, some patients were able to answer questions without speaking, moving, or opening their eyes. This discovery has reshaped how doctors assess consciousness, offering families a rare bridge of communication and giving patients a way to express themselves when physical responses are impossible. It also forces science to confront an uncomfortable truth. Awareness and unresponsiveness are not always the same thing, and the boundary between them can be far thinner than bedside exams suggest. A similar separation between awareness and perception appears in a condition known as blind sight. People with damage to their primary visual cortex may report complete blindness in part of their visual field, yet still respond accurately to objects they insist they cannot see. A person with blind sight might correctly point to a moving shape, avoid obstacles, or guess the location of an object at rates far above chance, all while experiencing no conscious visual image. This occurs because visual information can travel along alternative neural pathways, bypassing the damaged region and reaching brain areas responsible for movement and spatial guidance. Blind sight reveals that the brain can process detailed sensory information without it ever becoming a conscious experience, challenging the assumption that perception and awareness always travel together. Even more striking examples emerge from split brain surgery, a procedure once used to treat severe epilepsy by cutting the corpus callosum, the thick bridge of nerve fibers connecting the brain's two hemispheres. After surgery, most patients appear outwardly normal in daily life. But under controlled laboratory conditions, the two hemispheres can behave as if they operate independently. When information is presented only to the right hemisphere, which controls the left hand, but lacks speech, a patient may be unable to name what they saw, yet can draw it accurately with their left hand. This suggests that each hemisphere can hold its own stream of awareness, processing the world in parallel, but without direct communication. The phenomenon raises profound questions. Does this create two centers of consciousness within a single person, or does awareness remain unified in ways we don't yet understand, adding another layer of complexity? Certain medications can selectively erase memory without diminishing intelligence or alertness. Drugs in the sedative and anesthetic family can interfere with the brain's ability to form new memories while leaving reasoning language and responsiveness largely intact. A person may carry on a coherent conversation, follow instructions, and appear fully present, yet later retain no memory of the experience at all. This effect, known as anterograde amnesia, underscores a critical insight. Memory and consciousness are deeply linked, but they are not the same thing. Certain medications reveal just how loosely memory and awareness can be connected. Drugs in the sedative and anesthetic family can disrupt the brain's ability to store new memories while leaving alertness language and reasoning surprisingly intact. A person given medications such as midazolam may appear fully awake during a medical procedure, responding to questions and holding a conversation, yet later have no recollection of the event at all. This phenomenon, known as anterograde amnesia, primarily affects the hippocampus, a region crucial for converting short term experiences into long term memory. While this effect is often used deliberately to reduce psychological distress during surgery, it also demonstrates a striking reality. A moment can be consciously experienced and still vanish completely from personal history. Other states push this separation even further. In certain advanced meditation practices, especially during long retreats or deep states of sustained focus, individuals report a temporary loss of the sense of self. Practitioners describe a condition often called ego dissolution, where the usual feeling of being a separate individual fades or disappears. Perception may feel expansive. Thoughts may slow or fall silent, and the boundary between the observer and the world can blur. Brain imaging of experienced meditators shows altered activity in networks associated with self referential thinking including the default mode network. While many describe these states as calm or liberating, they can also be deeply disorienting without proper preparation. Studying them offers insight into how the brain constructs identity and how fluid that construction can be. At the opposite extreme lies a condition where the sense of self remains fully intact, but the body can no longer respond. Locked in syndrome is a rare neurological disorder often caused by damage to the brainstem, in which a person loses nearly all voluntary muscle control while remaining fully conscious and aware. Speech movement and even blinking may be impossible. In some cases, only minimal eye movements remain, allowing communication through painstaking systems that translate tiny signals into yes or no answers. Despite the severe physical paralysis, intelligence, memory, and personality are often preserved. For the individual experiencing it, the condition can feel like being sealed inside a motionless body, a stark illustration of how consciousness can persist even when expression is nearly erased. Sleep offers yet another window into this separation. During sleepwalking, a type of parasomnia, the brain enters a mixed state where certain systems are awake while others remain offline. Most sleepwalking episodes involve simple actions such as walking through familiar spaces. But in rare cases, people have cooked meals, left their homes, or even driven vehicles while still technically asleep. During these moments, motor control and habitual routines remain active, while higher reasoning judgment and memory formation are largely disengaged. This explains why sleepwalkers often have no memory of their actions afterward, and why complex behavior does not always require full conscious awareness. Because of this partial shutdown, sleepwalkers usually have no memory of what they've done. Their actions unfold without being recorded, revealing that movement and even decision making don't always require full conscious oversight. The brain can run complex routines automatically, guided by deeply ingrained patterns rather than deliberate thought. While this ability is remarkable, it can also be risky. Without conscious judgment, a sleeping person may interact with their surroundings in ways that expose them to real danger. Another state blurs the boundary between dreaming and waking in a very different way. Sleep paralysis occurs when the mind awakens before the body does. During sleep, the brain naturally switches on muscle inhibition to prevent us from acting out our dreams. In sleep paralysis, awareness returns while this paralysis remains in place. The person can see, hear, and think clearly, yet cannot move or speak. Episodes may last only seconds or stretch into minutes, and they are often accompanied by intense hallucinations, the sensation of a presence nearby, pressure on the chest, or shadowy figures in the room. These experiences are believed to arise when dream imagery spills into waking awareness, amplified by the brain's threat detection systems. Though sleep paralysis is not physically dangerous, the loss of control combined with fear can make it profoundly disturbing. Recognizing it as a temporary mismatch between brain systems can reduce panic even if the experience itself feels overwhelming in the moment. Our sense of time is equally fragile under extreme conditions. People who survive accidents or sudden life threatening events often report that everything seemed to slow down. Scientists think this effect comes not from faster reactions, but from intensified attention and memory encoding. In moments of danger, the amygdala signals the brain to capture far more detail than usual. When the event is later recalled, the dense stream of stored information gives the impression that time itself stretched. This distortion can be useful sharpening focus on critical details, but it also reveals how elastic our perception of time becomes across different states of consciousness. Certain substances can reshape that sense of self even more dramatically. Psychedelics such as LSD, psilocybin, and DMT are known to induce states often described as ego dissolution, where the usual boundaries between self and environment soften or disappear. People frequently report a feeling of unity as if the personal I gives way to a broader field of awareness. Brain imaging studies show reduced activity in the default mode network, the system associated with self focused thought and personal narrative. With this network quieted, consciousness may feel less centered on identity and more open or expansive. While these experiences can feel meaningful or profound, they can also be disorienting, and their long term effects remain an active area of research. For scientists, they offer a controlled way to observe how the brain constructs and temporarily loosens the sense of who we are. Even without chemicals, the brain has an extraordinary ability to adapt and reorganize itself. This capacity, known as neuroplasticity, allows neural networks to rewire in response to injury or change. After strokes, traumatic injuries, or even surgical removal of brain tissue, remaining areas can sometimes assume functions once managed by damaged regions. Through therapy, repetition, and time, new pathways form, enabling recovery of movement, language, or perception. In some cases, this reorganization happens gradually. In others, it emerges unexpectedly. Neuroplasticity demonstrates that consciousness is not fixed in a single structure, but supported by a dynamic system capable of reshaping itself in order to persist. When an injury disrupts one region of the brain, nearby networks can sometimes learn to take over. If part of the motor cortex is damaged, neighboring neurons may slowly assume control of weakened muscles through repeated use and rehabilitation. In cases where language ability is lost, other regions can form alternative pathways that support speech and comprehension. The degree of recovery varies widely, shaped by age, overall health, and the intensity of therapy. Yet these examples reveal a central truth. The brain is not a rigid machine. Its ability to reconfigure itself allows conscious experience to continue, adapt, and reorganize even after significant physical damage. At times, however, changes to the brain reshape not just abilities, but personality itself. Certain injuries can alter behavior so dramatically that loved ones feel they are interacting with a different person. One of the most well known examples is Phineas Gage, a 19th century railroad worker who survived a severe frontal brain injury when an iron rod passed through his skull. Although his intelligence and basic skills remained intact, those around him reported profound shifts in temperament. He became impulsive, unpredictable, and emotionally unstable. Damage to the frontal lobes. Particularly the prefrontal cortex can disrupt decision making, emotional regulation, and social judgment. These cases remind us that personality, often seen as the most stable part of who we are, is deeply rooted in neural circuitry and brain chemistry. The brain's internal maps can also persist even when the body itself changes. After an amputation, many individuals continue to feel sensations, including pain in the missing limb. This phenomenon, known as phantom limb syndrome, occurs because the brain's representation of the body does not immediately update after physical loss. Neurons in the somatosensory cortex responsible for processing touch and movement may still activate as if the limb were present. As a result, sensations can feel strikingly real, leading some people to instinctively attempt to move or scratch a limb that no longer exists. Therapies such as mirror therapy use visual feedback to help retrain these neural maps, often reducing discomfort. Phantom limbs reveal that our sense of the body is constructed within the brain and can outlast changes to physical reality. In some cases, the brain even finds new ways to perceive the world when a sense is lost. Certain blind individuals develop a form of echolocation, producing clicking sounds with their mouth or tapping a cane and interpreting the returning echoes. With practice, they can estimate distance, recognize shapes, and navigate complex environments using sound alone. Brain imaging shows that in skilled echolocators, areas of the visual cortex normally devoted to sight become active while processing echoes. This repurposing demonstrates the brain's remarkable flexibility, allowing unused regions to support entirely new forms of perception. Although echolocation does not replace vision, it provides a level of spatial awareness that challenges common assumptions about sensory limits. When sensory input is removed altogether, the brain may turn inward. In complete darkness and silence, such as in soundproof or sensory deprivation environments, the mind often begins generating its own experiences. People may see drifting lights, hear imagined sounds, or encounter vivid internal scenes and voices. These hallucinations arise because the brain is constantly predicting and constructing sensory input. Without real signals to correct those predictions, internal activity can intensify and take on a life of its own. While brief sensory isolation can feel calming or meditative, extended deprivation may become disorienting, revealing how active and creative the brain truly is, even in the absence of the external world. This body of evidence reveals that conscious perception is not something we simply receive from the world. It is something the brain actively builds moment by moment from internal processes and external signals. Even while asleep, awareness does not always disappear. In lucid dreaming, a person becomes aware that they are dreaming and may even influence what unfolds. Remarkably recent experiments have shown that lucid dreamers can communicate with researchers in real time. While remaining asleep, participants are asked to simple yes or no questions and respond using pre agreed eye movements or subtle facial muscle signals. These exchanges demonstrate that two-way communication is possible within a dream state. They suggest that consciousness is not confined to waking life, and that even in the depths of sleep, part of the mind can remain connected to the outside world. In contrast, consciousness can vanish completely during certain neurological events. Not all epileptic seizures involve violent convulsions. Some types, such as absence seizures or complex partial seizures, can abruptly shut down conscious awareness while the body remains still or performs simple automatic actions. To an observer, the person may appear frozen mid sentence or staring blankly into space. Internally, there is often no experience at all and no memory once awareness returns. These episodes may last only seconds, yet during that time, conscious experience is entirely absent. Brain recordings reveal sudden bursts of synchronized electrical activity that disrupt the neural patterns required for awareness. Such seizures show that consciousness can be switched off and on rapidly without interrupting vital functions like breathing or posture. Medical technology has further revealed how fragile and precise this balance can be. Deep brain stimulation involves implanting electrodes into specific brain regions to deliver carefully controlled electrical pulses. Originally designed to treat movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, this technique has also produced striking effects on awareness. In rare cases, stimulating areas like the thalamus, a central hub for sensory and neural communication, has restored responsiveness in patients who were previously minimally conscious. In other situations, stimulation can momentarily disrupt awareness, almost like flipping a switch. These findings suggest that consciousness emerges from coordinated activity across multiple brain networks, and that altering those networks electrically can profoundly change mental states. Sleep disorders also offer insight into how consciousness transitions can fail. Narcolepsy is a neurological condition that disrupts the brain's control of sleep and wakefulness. One of its most dramatic symptoms is cataplexy, a sudden loss of muscle tone triggered by strong emotions such as laughter or surprise. In these moments, a person may collapse even though they remain fully conscious. In other cases, individuals with narcolepsy can fall directly into dream sleep without passing through normal sleep stages. Because the body becomes paralyzed during dream sleep to prevent movement, this sudden transition can be startling and dangerous. Studying narcolepsy has helped scientists understand how the brain switches between conscious states and what happens when those switches malfunction. In rare individuals, consciousness itself takes on unusual forms. Synesthesia is a condition in which stimulation of one sense automatically triggers experiences in another. Some people see colors when they hear sounds or associate numbers with specific hues. In more extreme cases, a person might taste flavors when touching certain textures or hear sounds when viewing bright colors. These experiences are consistent, vivid, and involuntary. Synesthesia reveals that sensory boundaries in the brain are not as rigid as once believed, and that perception depends on how neural pathways connect and communicate. Together, these phenomena paint a striking picture of consciousness. It is not a single switch that is either on or off, nor a passive reflection of the external world. Instead, it is a dynamic process, constructed, interrupted, reshaped, and sometimes radically altered by the brain itself. Understanding these fragile and flexible states brings us closer to answering one of the deepest questions of all: how the physical brain gives rise to the feeling of being aware. Brain imaging studies reveal that in people with synesthesia, sensory regions of the brain are more tightly interconnected than usual. Signals are able to travel between areas that are normally kept separate, allowing sound to become color texture, to become taste, or numbers, to take on distinct visual forms. For those who experience synesthesia, these perceptions are stable and automatic. The same sound always produces the same color. The same word evokes the same shape or flavor. While this can make the world feel richer and more layered, it also challenges the idea that perception is universal. It suggests that much of what we experience as reality is filtered, shaped, and assembled uniquely within each individual brain. Memory, too, can exist at the far edges of what seems possible. A small number of people possess what is known as highly superior autobiographical memory, or HSM, the ability to recall the events of nearly any day in their lives with extraordinary precision. Ask them about a random date from decades ago, and they can often describe the weather, what they were wearing, conversations they had, and where they went with a level of detail that rivals written records. Brain scans show subtle differences in regions involved in memory organization and retrieval, though the exact mechanism behind HSAM remains unclear. While this ability may sound like a gift, many people with HSM describe it as emotionally exhausting. Painful memories are just as vivid and unavoidable as joyful ones. Their experience provides scientists with a rare glimpse into how deeply memories is woven into conscious identity. The mind's influence over perception becomes even more apparent under hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of focused attention and heightened responsiveness to suggestion guided by a trained practitioner. In clinical settings, it has been used to help patients undergo dental procedures, minor surgeries, and even childbirth with little or no chemical anesthesia. Through suggestion, individuals can reinterpret pain signals, dampen emotional distress, or experience numbness in specific parts of the body. Brain imaging studies show that hypnosis alters activity in regions responsible for pain perception, reducing both its sensory intensity and emotional impact. While not everyone is equally responsive, hypnosis demonstrates that pain is not solely a physical signal, it is also shaped by expectation, focus, and meaning. Belief alone can sometimes trigger measurable changes in the brain and body. This phenomenon is known as the placebo effect. When a person believes they are receiving an effective treatment, their symptoms may improve, even if the treatment contains no active ingredient. Far from being imaginary placebo responses, involve real neurochemical changes. The expectation of relief can stimulate the release of natural painkillers such as endorphins and influence neurotransmitters involved in mood movement and motivation. Placebo effects have been observed in conditions ranging from chronic pain to depression and even Parkinson's disease. Although they cannot replace medical treatment, they reveal the remarkable power of expectation in shaping conscious experience and physical outcomes. The boundary between conscious and unconscious control is also more flexible than it appears. Biofeedback training allows people to gain awareness of bodily processes that usually operate automatically, such as heart rate, muscle tension, or skin temperature. By observing real time feedback from sensors and adjusting breathing attention or relaxation, individuals can gradually learn to influence these systems directly. With practice, biofeedback has been used to reduce stress, manage chronic pain, and enhance performance. Some advanced practitioners can raise the temperature of their hands or slow their heart rate to levels typically seen in deep meditation. These abilities demonstrate that the mind can exert an influence over the body in ways once thought impossible. Together, these phenomena reveal a consistent theme. Consciousness is not a fixed state, nor is perception a passive reflection of reality. Memory, sensation, pain, and bodily control are all shaped by dynamic interactions within the brain. By studying these extreme and unusual cases, neuroscience continues to uncover how flexible, powerful, and deeply constructed our experience of being aware truly is. This ability reveals that the boundary between conscious and unconscious control of the body is far more flexible than most people realize. With the right tools and feedback, awareness can extend into physiological systems that normally function entirely on their own. Processes once thought to be automatic and inaccessible can, under certain conditions, be gently influenced by focused attention and learning. It suggests that consciousness is not confined to thoughts and emotions alone, but can reach deeper into the body's internal regulation when given a clear signal to follow. When external structure disappears, the mind can also lose its grip on time itself. In prolonged isolation, where daylight clocks and social interaction are removed, the brain's internal sense of time begins to drift. Studies of volunteers living in sealed environments for weeks or months show that many gradually abandon the normal 24-hour rhythm without realizing it. Some adopt much longer or shorter days, while others believe only a few days have passed when several weeks are already gone. The brain relies heavily on environmental cues to anchor its internal clock, and without them, consciousness starts to follow its own unstable rhythm. This phenomenon has serious implications for astronauts, deep sea crews, and anyone living or working in closed artificial worlds. Memory, too, is less reliable than it feels from the inside. Some people remember events that never actually happened with complete confidence. These false memories can form naturally as the brain fills in gaps, or they can be shaped by suggestion. Experiments have shown that individuals can be led to vividly recall entirely fictional childhood experiences, such as being lost in a shopping mall, and describe them with emotional detail. Brain imaging reveals that recalling false memories activates patterns strikingly similar to those seen when remembering real events. This overlap shows that consciousness does not store a perfect recording of the past. Instead, it continuously reconstructs experience, blending fact, assumption, and imagination into a narrative that feels seamless, yet remains fragile and prone to distortion. When it comes to consciousness itself, size may matter far less than structure. Brain volume alone is a poor predictor of conscious complexity. Whales and elephants possess brains larger than ours, yet the human brain is packed with exceptionally dense and efficient neural connections. What appears to matter most is how information moves through the system, how rapidly and effectively different regions communicate and integrate sensory input, memory, and decision making into a unified experience. A smaller brain with highly optimized wiring can outperform the larger, less efficient one in many cognitive tasks. This is why certain birds and primates, despite their modest brain size, demonstrate problem solving abilities comparable to those of young humans. These comparisons suggest that consciousness may arise not from sheer neuron count, but from the brain's capacity to coordinate vast networks smoothly and quickly. In this sense, wiring may be the true foundation of awareness. Perhaps the most striking example comes from the smallest brains known to display complex behavior. Insects like honeybees possess brains with fewer than 1 million neurons, a tiny fraction of the human total. Yet these miniature systems support remarkably sophisticated abilities. Bees can navigate over long distances, recognize individual human faces, and communicate precise spatial information through their intricate waggle dances. They have even demonstrated an understanding of abstract concepts such as same and different, a form of flexible thinking once believed to require much larger brains. Whether this qualifies as consciousness remains debated, but these behaviors clearly exceed simple reflexes. They challenge the assumption that awareness requires scale and instead point toward efficiency, organization, and adaptability as the deeper ingredients of conscious experience. These miniature brains remind us that mental sophistication does not always depend on massive neural hardware. By studying insects, scientists uncover how surprisingly small systems can still integrate information, weigh options, and adapt to changing conditions. Abilities we often associate with large complex brains can emerge from compact networks that are organized with remarkable efficiency. This challenges the assumption that intelligence must scale directly with size. Some of the most striking examples of alternative intelligence come from the ocean. Octopuses possess a nervous system unlike anything found in humans. Rather than concentrating most neural processing in the head, nearly two-thirds of an octopus's neurons are distributed throughout its arms. Each arm can sense taste and coordinate movement with a high degree of independence. In fact, an octopus arm can respond to stimuli and manipulate objects even when separated from the body, displaying a startling level of autonomy. This distributed form of control suggests that an octopus may experience the world in a radically different way, not through a single centralized command center, but through multiple semi independent processing systems working together. Such an arrangement challenges human centered models of consciousness that assume one unified brain directing everything. By studying octopuses, scientists gain insight into how awareness and intelligence might arise in organisms with entirely different neural architectures, offering clues about how non human or even alien minds could function. Birds provide another powerful example of unexpected cognitive ability. Species like crows, ravens, and parrots demonstrate problem solving skills comparable to those of young children, despite having much smaller brains than most mammals. New Caledonian crows have been observed bending pieces of wire into hooks to retrieve food, a behavior that requires foresight and planning. African gray parrots have shown an understanding of numbers, colors, and even the concept of zero. These abilities point to a level of mental flexibility once thought exclusive to humans and great apes. Birds achieve this through a brain structure called the pallium, which packs neurons densely and connects them in highly efficient networks. Their success shows that advanced cognition and possibly forms of conscious awareness can evolve through very different biological designs. Intelligence, it seems, is not bound to one anatomical blueprint. At the same time, modern machines complicate the picture even further. Artificial intelligence systems can now simulate human speech with astonishing realism. They can hold conversations, answer complex questions, and generate creative text. Yet beneath this surface fluency lies no subjective experience, no inner awareness. These systems operate by detecting patterns in vast amounts of data, predicting which words are statistically likely to follow others. They produce convincing output without understanding meaning in any experiential sense. This distinction between appearing intelligent and actually being aware sits at the heart of debates about machine consciousness. A system may perfectly mimic human behavior, but without subjective experience, it is still processing symbols without knowing what they represent. Behavior alone then may not be enough to reveal the presence of consciousness. This concern is captured in the famous Chinese room thought experiment proposed by philosopher John Searle. Imagine a person who does not understand Chinese locked inside a room following detailed instructions for manipulating Chinese characters. To someone outside, the responses appear fluent and meaningful, but inside the room, there is no comprehension, only rule following. Searle argued that computers might operate in the same way, producing correct answers without any true understanding. The experiment challenges the idea that generating appropriate behavior is sufficient proof of awareness. All of these questions lead back to one of the deepest mysteries in science and philosophy. The so-called hard problem of consciousness, a term introduced by philosopher David Chalmers, remains unresolved. Science can map neural activity with increasing precision, showing which brain regions activate when we see colors, feel emotions, or recall memories. Yet it cannot explain why these physical processes give rise to subjective experience at all. Why does neural activity feel like something from the inside? That question still sits at the edge of human understanding, quietly resisting every attempt at a final answer. This gap between what science can measure and what we actually experience from the inside has resisted decades of research. Despite remarkable advances in neuroscience, the question remains stubbornly open. Some researchers believe the answer will eventually emerge from more precise brain imaging, better models of neural networks, and a deeper understanding of how information flows through the nervous system. Others argue that no amount of improved measurement will be enough and that solving this mystery may require a fundamentally new way of thinking about reality itself. Until then, The hard problem of consciousness remains one of the deepest unsolved questions in science. To address this gap, some thinkers have proposed radical ideas. One of them is panpsychism, the view that awareness is not something that suddenly appears in complex brains, but is present in some minimal form throughout all matter. According to this perspective, consciousness may be a basic feature of the universe, existing everywhere from humans and animals down to rocks and subatomic particles. Supporters argue that this approach sidesteps the hard problem by removing the need to explain how awareness emerges from non aware matter in the first place. Critics, however, point out serious challenges. Panpsychism is difficult to test experimentally and risks stretching the definition of consciousness so broadly that it loses explanatory power. Still, the idea has gained renewed interest among philosophers and some scientists who see it as a possible bridge between physical processes and subjective experience rather than a complete solution. Another speculative direction looks even deeper toward the foundations of physics. Some quantum theorists suggest that consciousness may arise from processes occurring at the subatomic level. In this view, microscopic quantum events inside neurons could influence mental states in ways that classical physics cannot fully explain. One well-known proposal, often referred to as the orchestrated objective reduction theory, suggests that quantum processes within microtubules, tiny structural components inside cells, may play a role in generating awareness. This idea remains highly controversial. The brain is a warm, noisy biological environment, conditions that are generally thought to disrupt delicate quantum states almost instantly. So far, there is little direct evidence linking quantum mechanics to conscious experience. Still exploring these possibilities keeps open the idea that consciousness might be connected to the universe's most fundamental physical laws, rather than being merely an emergent property of large neural networks. Most neuroscientists remain skeptical. The majority argue that classical physics and well established neurobiology are sufficient to explain how the brain works. While quantum effects have been observed in certain biological processes, such as photosynthesis, extending these findings to complex mental phenomena is a far greater leap. Current brain models can already account for perception memory learning and decision making without invoking quantum mechanics. Yet the debate persists largely because the mystery of consciousness runs so deep that even unlikely explanations continue to attract serious attention. One of the clearest windows into how consciousness fluctuates comes from the brain's own electrical rhythms. Neural activity unfolds in rhythmic patterns known as brain waves, which differ in speed and are linked to distinct mental states. These waves are measured in cycles per second, or hertz, and can be detected using electroencephalography, or EEG, by placing electrodes on the scalp to capture tiny voltage changes. Fast brain waves tend to dominate during alert thinking, focused attention, and intense mental effort, while slower waves appear during relaxation, drowsiness, and deep sleep. EEG recordings reveal that the brain is never truly static. Its rhythms constantly shift moment by moment, depending on what we are doing, thinking, or feeling. This suggests that consciousness is not a single fixed state, but a dynamic pattern that flows through different modes across the day, from rapid bursts of alert awareness to slow, steady cycles of deep rest. Among these rhythms, gamma waves are the fastest cycling, more than 30 times per second. They are associated with higher cognitive functions, such as complex problem solving, memory retrieval, and the integration of information from multiple senses. When separate ideas suddenly connect during an insight or an aha moment, gamma activity often surges. These rapid oscillations appear to play a role in binding scattered neural signals into a unified experience, offering a glimpse of how the brain may weave countless processes into the single stream of awareness we experience as consciousness. These fast rhythms are believed to help synchronize distant regions of the brain, allowing separate streams of information to lock together into a single, coherent perception. Instead of each area working in isolation, gamma activity appears to act like a timing signal, aligning neural processes so that sight, sound, memory, and intention merge into one conscious moment. Interestingly, experienced meditators often show unusually strong and sustained gamma waves, suggesting that long term mental training can reshape the brain's coordination patterns. While gamma activity alone does not define intelligence or creativity, it seems to support the fluid, interconnected quality that characterizes conscious thought at its most integrated. As brain activity slows, another rhythm becomes prominent. Alpha waves emerge during relaxed wakefulness, oscillating at roughly 8 to 12 cycles per second. They are most noticeable when you are calm, but awake, such as during quiet reflection, gentle focus, or the moments just before sleep. Closing the eyes often increases alpha activity, signaling a shift away from external sensory input and toward internal awareness. These waves are associated with reduced stress, improved learning, and enhanced creativity, possibly because they help filter out unnecessary information. Practices like meditation and controlled breathing reliably increase alpha rhythms, offering insight into how the brain balances outward attention with inward calm. Slower still are theta waves, which cycle between 4 and 8 times per second and are closely linked to dreaming deep meditation and imaginative states. Theta activity often accompanies vivid mental imagery, daydreaming, and sudden creative insights. In these moments, the brain seems less constrained by linear logic and more open to unexpected connections between memories and ideas. Some people deliberately cultivate theta states through hypnosis or meditation to support creative problem solving. Because theta rhythms overlap with activity in the brain's default mode network, they may also play an important role in emotional processing and the integration of experiences into long term memory. This blend of imagination, reflection, and meaning makes theta waves a particularly intriguing feature of conscious life. At the slowest end of the spectrum are delta waves cycling fewer than 4 times per second. Delta activity dominates during the deepest stages of non REM sleep, when conscious awareness nearly disappears. During this phase, the brain focuses on restoration, repairing tissues, strengthening the immune system, and consolidating certain forms of memory. Although the mind feels absent, neural activity remains intense behind the scenes, sustaining vital bodily functions. Delta waves are especially prominent in infants and young children whose brains are undergoing rapid growth and reorganization. For adults, sufficient time in deep delta sleep is essential for physical recovery and emotional stability. When this stage is disrupted, rest can feel shallow even after many hours in bed. Beyond these broad rhythms, the brain also produces brief, precise electrical events linked to memory formation. When new information is encoded, neurons generate short bursts of high frequency activity known as ripples. These fleeting signals appear especially during sleep and quiet rest when the brain replays recent experiences and integrates them into existing knowledge. Ripples are thought to help transfer memories from temporary storage in the hippocampus to more durable networks across the cortex. In this way, even when consciousness seems dim or absent, the brain is actively shaping the narrative of who we are, quietly weaving experience into memory beneath the surface of awareness. These ripple events arise most prominently within the hippocampus, a deep brain structure essential for forming new memories. During these moments, recent experiences are quietly replayed as if the brain were rehearsing the day in silence. Ripple activity becomes especially pronounced during slow wave sleep, a phase when the mind appears inactive, but memory systems are working intensely behind the scenes. Researchers believe these brief electrical surges help synchronize distant brain regions, strengthening neural pathways and stabilizing new information for long term storage. Experiments in animals show that disrupting ripples can weaken learning while amplifying them may enhance memory retention. By decoding these patterns, scientists hope to develop new strategies for treating memory loss and cognitive decline. Altered states of consciousness can also emerge when the brain is deprived of oxygen. In hypoxia, when oxygen levels drop too low, perception can shift in dramatic and sometimes surreal ways. People may report bright flashes of light, narrowing vision, or immersive hallucinations that feel vivid and real. Such experiences can occur at high altitudes during deep sea diving or in medical emergencies. Oxygen deprivation disrupts normal neural signaling, particularly in areas responsible for vision balance and spatial awareness. Alongside these perceptual changes often come confusion, disorientation, and a sense of detachment from the body or surroundings. Though dangerous, these states reveal how delicately balanced conscious perception is and how quickly it can transform when the brain's most basic requirements are threatened. In the unusual environment of space consciousness can shift in equally surprising ways. Astronauts living aboard the International Space Station have described intensely vivid dreams, flashes of light behind closed eyes, and at times faint phantom sounds. Some of these visual sensations are thought to result from cosmic rays, high energy particles that pass through the spacecraft and stimulate the retina directly. Others may arise from disrupted circadian rhythms, prolonged isolation, and the psychological effects of living far from Earth. Microgravity also alters how fluids circulate in the body, subtly changing pressure within the skull and potentially influencing brain function. These reports offer scientists rare insight into how awareness adapts beyond the conditions in which the human brain evolved. Subtle shifts in consciousness have also been reported through microdosing psychedelic substances. Microdosing involves taking extremely small, non hallucinogenic amounts of compounds, such as LSD or psilocybin. At these doses, users typically do not experience vivid visuals or loss of control. Instead, many describe gentle changes in mood, sharper focus, and increased creative flexibility. Researchers believe these effects may come from slight adjustments in how neural networks communicate, loosening rigid thought patterns without overwhelming perception. Although scientific evidence is still emerging, studying microdosing provides another window into how small chemical changes can nudge the brain's cognitive rhythms without fully disrupting conscious stability. Early findings suggest that microdosing may gently reshape how different brain networks communicate, loosening rigid patterns and allowing thought to flow more freely. At these subtle levels, the brain does not enter an altered reality, but rather shifts its internal balance just enough to explore new mental pathways. Still, much of the current evidence comes from personal reports, and placebo effects appear to play a significant role. For this reason, controlled clinical studies are now underway to determine whether these reported benefits persist under rigorous testing and to uncover the underlying mechanisms. Though controversial, microdosing provides researchers with a rare chance to observe sustained low intensity changes in conscious processing without overwhelming perception. There are moments when consciousness becomes so focused that time itself seems to dissolve. This state, known as flow, occurs when a person is completely absorbed in an activity that is both challenging and deeply engaging. Musicians, artists, athletes, and even writers often describe losing awareness of themselves while performing at their best. Brain imaging suggests that during flow activity decreases in the default mode network, the system associated with self monitoring and inner dialogue, while coordination between attention, perception, and movement intensifies. The result is a feeling of effortless action, heightened clarity, and intrinsic satisfaction. Flow reveals that consciousness can narrow and sharpen so precisely that everything outside the task fades into the background. In contrast, certain neurological events can abruptly distort perception. Some people who experience migraines report sensory auras that alter how the world appears. Straight lines may ripple or bend objects, can seem unnaturally large or small, and familiar faces may briefly appear distorted or unfamiliar. These effects are thought to arise from waves of electrical activity spreading across the visual cortex, temporarily disrupting normal processing. Although these changes usually pass within an hour, they can feel deeply unsettling. Migraine auras demonstrate how sensitive perception is to even brief imbalances in neural activity, and studying them helps scientists understand how stable conscious experience is maintained. Another curious disruption of perception is déjà vu, the uncanny feeling that a present moment has already been lived. One leading explanation suggests that sensory information is momentarily misrouted, reaching memory related regions before conscious awareness catches up. The brain then interprets the experience as a recollection rather than something new. Other theories propose that parallel processing systems briefly fall out of sync, creating a false signal of familiarity. While usually harmless and fleeting deja vu occurs more often in certain neurological conditions, offering researchers valuable insight into how memory and awareness intersect in real time. There is also a lesser known opposite experience known as jamais vu. In this case, something deeply familiar suddenly feels strange or unrecognizable. A common word may lose its meaning when stared at too long, or a familiar place may feel momentarily foreign. Scientists believe this happens when recognition systems in the brain temporarily disengage, interrupting the automatic sense of familiarity that usually runs unnoticed. Though brief jamais vu reveals that familiarity itself is an active mental construction, one that can falter under specific conditions. Underlying all of these experiences is a remarkable process the brain performs continuously, reconstructing the present moment. Sensory information does not arrive all at once. Light, sound, and touch reach the brain at different speeds and require time to be processed. Yet consciousness stitches these delayed signals together into a single, seamless experience of now. When these delays grow too large due to injury technology or experimental manipulation, the illusion breaks and events feel disjointed or out of sync. This reveals that conscious experience is not a direct feed from reality, but a carefully assembled interpretation designed to feel immediate and coherent. To create a stable experience of reality, the mind constantly smooths over what it cannot fully sense. Our eyes and ears never capture the world in complete detail, yet consciousness feels continuous and whole. This is because the brain automatically fills in missing information. In certain visual illusions, objects may briefly vanish from awareness, but motion still appears fluid. The brain blends fragments of the recent past with predictions about the immediate future, constructing a seamless flow where gaps would otherwise exist. This ability helps us function in a rapidly changing environment, but it also means perception can be subtly inaccurate without us ever noticing. These blending illusions reveal that awareness relies heavily on prediction, with the brain using prior knowledge to infer what is most likely happening when sensory data is incomplete. At the far edges of human experience, perception can shift in even more dramatic ways. Some people who come close to death report intense inner experiences marked by peace detachment or vivid imagery. They may describe floating outside their bodies, traveling through a tunnel toward light, or feeling a profound calm that replaces fear. Scientists suggest these sensations may arise from sudden changes in brain chemistry and electrical activity caused by extreme stress or reduced oxygen. While interpretations range from strictly biological explanations to deeply spiritual beliefs, the striking similarities across cultures make these experiences an important subject of study. Exploring them offers rare insight into how consciousness behaves when the brain is pushed to its limits. In equally rare moments, some individuals describe an entire lifetime unfolding in seconds. During extreme danger, people have reported rapid, vivid life reviews in which memories from decades past appear with intense emotional clarity. Researchers believe this may occur when stress triggers widespread activation of memory networks, possibly as part of an emergency survival response. Although the precise mechanism remains unclear, the speed and richness of these recollections suggest that the brain can access vast amounts of stored information almost instantaneously. Studying these episodes may reveal how memories are organized and how quickly they can be retrieved under extraordinary conditions. At the center of all these experiences lies a deeper question: the nature of the self itself. Many neuroscientists now view the sense of self not as a fixed entity, but as a model the brain continuously constructs and updates. This internal model integrates sensations, memories, emotions, and goals into a coherent identity that feels stable over time. Yet this sense of self can fracture. Injury, mental illness, or certain substances can disrupt it, exposing its constructed nature. In conditions like depersonalization disorder, individuals may feel detached from their own thoughts or bodies, as if observing themselves from a distance. These experiences suggest that the self is fluid rather than permanent, an illusion the brain carefully maintains because it is essential for navigating the world. Long before complex brains evolved, however, decision making already existed in simpler forms. Single celled organisms, such as bacteria and amoebas, have no nervous systems. Yet they can move toward nutrients, retreat from harmful environments, and adapt to changing conditions. Their behavior is guided by chemical signaling rather than conscious awareness, but it demonstrates that basic decision making does not require a brain. Studying these primitive systems offers valuable clues about the evolutionary foundations of awareness and the gradual steps that may have led from simple biological responses to the rich inner experiences of human consciousness. All of this suggests that purposeful behavior exists on a wide spectrum, and what we call consciousness may be only one point along that continuum. Even organisms without brains can act in ways that appear intelligent. Slime molds offer a striking example. Though made of single cells with no nervous system, they can grow into vast branching networks that respond intelligently to their environment. In laboratory experiments, slime molds placed inside mazes with food at separate exits gradually withdraw from dead ends and strengthen the most efficient route between the two sources. Over time, the organism forms the shortest possible path, effectively solving the maze. This behavior emerges purely from chemical signaling and growth dynamics, not from neurons or awareness. Yet, it closely resembles problem solving. Such findings challenge traditional definitions of intelligence and decision making, revealing that adaptation and efficiency can arise even in the absence of a brain. While these primitive systems operate without sleep, the human brain never fully turns off even during rest. In the lighter stages of sleep, which occur at the beginning of the sleep cycle, consciousness does not vanish completely. The brain continues to monitor the environment, processing sounds, bodily sensations, and fragments of speech. This is why you may awaken instantly if someone says your name, even while asleep. EEG recordings during light sleep show slower brain waves mixed with brief bursts of faster activity, known as sleep spindles. These spindles appear to serve as selective filters dampening unimportant noise while allowing meaningful signals such as a baby's cry or an alarm to pass through. Light sleep acts as a bridge between waking awareness and deeper restorative stages, and it may also be a period when the brain quietly reviews certain memories, preparing them for consolidation later in the night. When sleep is withheld for too long, the structure of perception begins to break down. Severe sleep deprivation does far more than cause exhaustion. After roughly 3 days without sleep, many people begin to experience visual distortions, fleeting shadows at the edges of vision, or even vivid hallucinations. These effects arise because the brain can no longer maintain stable sensory processing without the repair and regulation provided by sleep. Systems responsible for attention, reality testing, and sensory integration start to falter. In extreme cases, prolonged wakefulness can produce paranoia or symptoms that closely resemble acute psychosis. Although these hallucinations usually disappear once normal sleep resumes, they reveal just how fragile conscious experience becomes when the brain is denied rest. Over extended periods, chronic sleep loss can blur the boundary between wakefulness and mental illness, showing that stable consciousness depends as much on sleep as it does on waking thought. When sleep deprivation stretches not just for days, but for weeks or months, its effects reach far beyond simple fatigue. Gradually, the mind begins to change. People may notice growing confusion, frequent memory gaps, rising anxiety, and a subtle but unsettling distortion of reality itself. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment planning and impulse control, is particularly sensitive to prolonged lack of rest. As this region weakens, rational decision making becomes harder to sustain. In severe cases, extended sleep loss can give rise to symptoms that resemble psychotic disorders, including fixed false beliefs and even auditory hallucinations. These changes reveal how closely sleep and mental health are intertwined and why consistent rest is essential for maintaining a stable sense of awareness. In many individuals, restoring healthy sleep can gradually reverse these symptoms, though prolonged deprivation may leave lasting marks on brain function. Chronic insomnia affects more than cognition, it reshapes emotional life. Insomnia is not simply the absence of sleep, but a state in which the brain remains trapped in heightened alertness. Research shows that people with long term insomnia exhibit increased activity in the amygdala, the brain's center for detecting threat and fear. At the same time, communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex weakens, reducing the brain's ability to regulate emotional responses. This imbalance can make everyday challenges feel intense and unmanageable, lowering resilience to stress. Over time, disrupted sleep increases vulnerability to anxiety and depressive disorders. Notably, treating insomnia often leads to measurable improvements in emotional stability, suggesting that sleep is one of the brain's primary tools for keeping feelings in balance. During the deepest stages of non REM sleep, the brain performs a vital form of maintenance. At this time, the glymphatic system becomes highly active, flushing out metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. Cerebrospinal fluid flows more freely through brain tissue, clearing substances such as beta amyloid proteins, which are associated with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. This cleansing process operates far more efficiently during deep sleep than during wakefulness, likely because neural activity slows, allowing space for fluid movement. Each night, this quiet cleaning cycle supports not only memory and mood, but the long term health of the brain itself. REM sleep plays a different yet equally important role. Known for vivid dreaming, this stage is also deeply involved in emotional processing. During REM sleep activity in emotion related regions, such as the amygdala, remains elevated, while stress related chemicals like norepinephrine are strongly suppressed. This unique chemical environment may allow the brain to revisit emotionally charged experiences without triggering the full stress response felt during wakefulness. In this way, difficult memories can be softened, integrated, and placed into a broader context. Sleep functions almost like a nightly form of emotional therapy, helping the mind digest experiences that might otherwise remain overwhelming. Even while dreaming, the brain does not completely disconnect from the outside world. Sensory information continues to filter in at low levels. Sounds, light, and even smells from the environment can subtly influence dream content, weaving external stimuli into the fabric of the dream narrative without fully awakening the sleeper. Researchers have found that the sleeping mind remains surprisingly responsive to its surroundings. When specific sounds, lights, or scents are introduced during sleep, they can subtly influence the direction a dream takes. The sound of flowing water may blend into a dream as a river or rainfall, while a gentle floral scent can shift dream imagery toward calmer, more pleasant scenes. These effects are not guaranteed and tend to work best during lighter stages of sleep or certain phases of REM when the brain is more receptive to external input. This interaction shows that dreams are not created in isolation, but emerge from a continuous interplay between internal memory processing and signals from the outside world. Further experiments using scent cues such as peppermint or smoke have demonstrated how sensory input can alter the emotional tone of dreams. Pleasant smells are more likely to produce positive or neutral dream experiences, while unpleasant odors can introduce tension or unsettling imagery. In a similar way, soft music or carefully timed sound effects can guide dream themes without fully waking the sleeper. Although these techniques are still experimental, they suggest future possibilities for influencing dreams in therapeutic settings, creative exploration, or stress reduction, and they reveal how permeable the boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness truly is. Remarkably, some people can communicate while still asleep. Studies involving lucid dreamers have shown that individuals can respond to simple yes or no questions during REM sleep. By using prearranged eye movements or subtle facial muscle signals, participants are able to answer researchers in real time while remaining inside the dream state. This discovery allows scientists to observe dream consciousness directly rather than relying solely on recollections after waking. It also suggests that certain brain networks involved in decision making and communication can stay active even when the body is deeply asleep. Sleep talking, known as somniloquy, offers another window into the sleeping mind. It can occur during any stage of sleep and ranges from quiet murmurs to complete sentences, often without any memory upon waking. While usually harmless sleep talking can sometimes express thoughts or emotions the speaker never intended to reveal. Because this behavior bypasses waking self control, it has long intrigued researchers studying unconscious processes. Interpreting its meaning, however, remains difficult, as the spoken words may reflect fragments of dreams, loosely connected memories, or spontaneous neural activity, rather than coherent hidden intentions. Sleepwalking highlights how porous the boundary is between sleeping and waking brain states. Even when the body appears disconnected from the environment, parts of the brain remain active enough to guide movement and behavior. This overlap reveals that consciousness is not an on off switch, but a spectrum in which different neural systems drift in and out of coordination. Sudden disruptions to this delicate balance can occur during a stroke. When blood flow to a region of the brain is interrupted, oxygen and nutrients are cut off, and awareness can change almost instantly. Depending on which areas are affected, a person may experience confusion, memory gaps, or a complete loss of responsiveness. Severe strokes can lead to coma or vegetative states, while milder ones may cause brief disorientation or altered perception. Damage to the brainstem can suppress wakefulness itself, whereas injuries to the frontal or parietal lobes often disturb attention, perception, and the sense of self. Recovery varies dramatically. Some regain clarity within hours, others take months, and some never fully return. These cases underscore how tightly consciousness depends on continuous, precise neural activity and how fragile it becomes when that flow is disrupted. Alien hand syndrome offers an even more unsettling glimpse into the mechanics of control. In this rare condition, one hand behaves as if it has a will of its own, carrying out purposeful actions without conscious permission. The disorder is usually linked to damage in regions that coordinate intention and movement, such as the corpus callosum or frontal and parietal lobes. People may watch their hand, button a shirt, grab objects, or undo actions performed by the other hand, all without deciding to move. The limb feels foreign, yet its actions are clearly goal directed. This dissociation shows that complex motor behavior can arise independently of conscious intention, revealing how our sense of agency depends on fragile cooperation between distributed brain systems. Even the feeling of being alive can fracture under rare neurological and psychiatric conditions. In Cotard's syndrome, some individuals become convinced that they are already dead, do not exist, or have lost their internal organs. Often associated with severe depression, psychosis, or brain injury, this condition profoundly alters self awareness. Patients may refuse food because they believe nourishment is unnecessary or insist their body is decaying. Brain imaging points to disrupted activity in networks responsible for emotional regulation and self representation. These cases illustrate how the brain constructs the most basic assumptions of existence, and how, when that construction fails, consciousness itself can turn against the reality it once effortlessly maintained. While rare Cotard syndrome reveals something deeply unsettling about human consciousness, the sense of being alive is not an absolute truth, but a mental construct continuously maintained by the brain. We usually experience existence as self evident, yet when the neural systems that generate this feeling malfunction, even the most basic certainty that we are alive can collapse. Treatment often involves medication, psychotherapy, and addressing underlying neurological damage, but recovery is frequently slow and uneven. The condition reminds us that consciousness is not merely awareness of the world, but awareness of being within it. Cotard's delusion, named after French neurologist Jules Cotard, is among the most extreme disruptions of self awareness ever documented. People affected may insist they no longer have organs, that their blood has dried up, or that they are already dead. In severe cases, they claim the world itself has lost reality. Research suggests the disorder arises from a breakdown in brain networks that normally integrate sensory information with emotional meaning. When that emotional signal disappears, sensory input alone is not enough to sustain the feeling of presence or vitality. Cotard's delusion shows that consciousness depends not just on perception, but on meaning, and when meaning dissolves, the sense of self can vanish from one's own experience. A different but equally striking distortion of consciousness appears in Capgras delusion. In this condition, individuals become convinced that someone close to them, often a spouse, parent, or friend, has been replaced by an identical imposter. The face looks correct, but it feels wrong. Neuroscientists believe this occurs because facial recognition systems remain intact, while emotional response circuits fail to activate. Without the expected emotional familiarity, the brain constructs an explanation. This must be a double. Capgras delusion illustrates how recognition is not purely visual. Knowing someone requires emotion memory and perception to work together seamlessly. In some cases, the brain loses conscious access to faces altogether. Prosopagnosia, or face blindness, occurs when damage affects the fusiform gyrus, a region in the temporal lobe specialized for facial recognition. People with this condition can see faces clearly and describe their features in detail, yet cannot identify familiar individuals, even close family members or themselves, in a mirror. Many rely on voices, posture, or clothing instead. Intriguingly, some patients show signs of unconscious recognition. Their heart rate or skin response changes when viewing familiar faces, despite conscious denial of recognition. This split reveals that awareness is not a single system, but layers of processing that can fall out of sync. Together, these disorders expose a profound truth about consciousness. Identity, familiarity, and even the feeling of being alive are not fixed properties of reality. They are fragile constructions, assembled moment by specialized brain networks. When those networks fracture, the self does not merely change, it can dissolve, duplicate, or disappear entirely. Consciousness, it seems, is not something we simply have, but something the brain must continuously work to create. In severe cases, individuals lose the ability to recognize close friends, family members, or even their own reflection in a mirror. Yet other aspects of vision remain intact. They can still identify objects, read facial expressions, and navigate the world visually without difficulty. This striking dissociation shows that face recognition is not a general visual skill, but a highly specialized process handled by dedicated neural circuits. To cope, many patients learn to rely on alternative cues such as voice posture, hairstyle, or characteristic movements. Studying damage to the fusiform gyrus not only informs rehabilitation strategies, but also reveals how consciousness divides visual perception into precise, task specific systems rather than treating sight as a single, unified function. Some people experience the world without mental imagery at all, a condition known as aphantasia. Aphantasia is the inability to form pictures in the mind's eye. People with this condition can remember facts, recognize faces, and understand spatial relationships, yet they cannot internally visualize scenes, objects, or people. Thinking of an apple may produce a list of attributes red, round, edible, without any visual image accompanying it. Aphantasia can be present from birth or appear after brain injury. Its recognition has challenged long held assumptions about imagination and memory, revealing that vivid visualization is not a universal feature of consciousness. Despite this, many individuals with aphantasia live creative and intellectually rich lives, relying on language logic and abstract reasoning rather than imagery. At the opposite end of the spectrum lies hyperphantasia, the ability to generate extremely vivid mental images that can feel almost as real as direct perception. People with hyperphantasia can summon detailed scenes, colors, and textures, instantly, often enhancing creativity in fields like art writing and design. However, this intensity can sometimes be distracting, as imagined imagery may compete with attention to the external world. Brain and imaging studies suggest increased activation in visual processing regions during imagination, highlighting how strongly these internal images are represented. Together, aphantasia and hyperphantasia demonstrate that mental imagery varies widely across individuals, even though it remains entirely private and invisible from the outside. Short term memory places another clear boundary on conscious processing. Also known as immediate or working memory, it allows the brain to temporarily hold small amounts of information, such as a phone number or a sentence, over a few seconds. Classic research by psychologist George Miller suggested that this capacity averages around 7 items plus or minus 2. The exact limit varies depending on the person and the type of information involved. The brain can stretch this capacity through chunking, grouping individual elements into larger, meaningful units. Remembering 1492 as a historical year is far easier than holding 4 unrelated digits in mind. Short term memory underpins nearly every mental task, from understanding speech to performing calculations. Without it, thought would fragment, unable to connect one moment to the next, and the sense of continuity in conscious experience would quickly break apart. Working memory functions like a mental workbench. It doesn't simply store information for a few seconds, it actively manipulates it in real time. Every time you calculate a tip in your head, follow a set of multi step directions, or weigh several options before making a decision, you are relying on working memory. This system depends on tight coordination between the prefrontal cortex, which directs attention, and executive control, and parietal regions that process numbers, space, and relationships. Working memory capacity differs from person to person and can be strengthened slightly through training, though it remains closely linked to overall cognitive ability. When working memory is disrupted by fatigue, stress, or brain injury, complex thinking quickly becomes difficult. Planning feels overwhelming. Decisions slow down, and even simple mental tasks begin to fracture. Long term memories, by contrast, are not stored in a single location. The brain does not archive experiences the way a computer saves files. Instead, memories are distributed across networks. Visual elements are encoded in visual regions, sounds in auditory areas, emotional tone in the amygdala, all connected and coordinated by the hippocampus, which helps organize and retrieve them. This distributed system gives memory a certain resilience. Damage to one area may erase some details while leaving others intact, but it also means remembering is never a simple replay. Each act of recall reconstructs the experience, reassembling fragments from different regions. In doing so, the memory can subtly change, blending the original event with newer information or current beliefs. Emotion plays a powerful role in deciding what is remembered. Events charged with strong feelings, whether joy, fear, or grief, are stored more deeply than neutral experiences. The amygdala signals the hippocampus to strengthen these memories, giving them priority. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Remembering what caused pain or pleasure helps guide future behavior and survival. These emotionally charged memories often feel vivid and immediate, even decades later, yet they are not immune to distortion. Certain details may grow exaggerated, while others fade entirely. The emotional intensity remains sometimes long after accuracy has softened. This reveals that consciousness does not treat all experiences equally. It preserves what feels meaningful, not necessarily what is precise. Memory is also vulnerable to suggestion. Rather than acting as a flawless record, it can be reshaped by outside influence. Experiments have repeatedly shown that people can be guided to remember events that never occurred simply through repeated questioning, suggestion, or exposure to misleading details. What makes false memories so unsettling is that they often feel completely real. They carry emotion confidence and narrative coherence indistinguishable from genuine recollections. In legal settings, this has profound implications, particularly for eyewitness testimony. The ease with which memory can be rewritten exposes how fragile and flexible our conscious sense of the past truly is. Remembering together can further distort what actually happened. When people recall events in groups, individual memories tend to shift toward a shared version. This process, known as memory conformity, occurs because hearing others' accounts can overwrite or blend with one's own recollection. Over time, a socially reinforced memory can emerge that feels vivid and certain, yet is partially or entirely inaccurate. Group recall often increases confidence while reducing accuracy, creating a powerful illusion of truth. It shows that memory is not only shaped by the brain, but also by social context, expectation, and belonging. Conscious experience of the past is therefore not fixed. It is continuously negotiated between neural systems, emotion, and the influence of others. These effects highlight that memory is not purely personal, it is also social. Our awareness of the past is shaped not only by what we experienced, but by how those experiences are shared, discussed, and reinforced by others. What we remember is often a collective construction as much as an individual one. In the future, brain implants may help restore memories that have been lost. Researchers are developing neural prosthetics designed to interact directly with the brain's memory systems. By recording the electrical patterns in the hippocampus as memories are formed and later replaying those patterns, these devices aim to mimic natural memory encoding. In animal studies and early human trials, such systems have already shown the ability to enhance recall. The long term goal is to help people with brain injuries, neurodegenerative diseases, or memory disorders regain lost cognitive function. While the technology remains experimental, it points toward a future where consciousness itself could be supported, repaired, or augmented through direct brain machine interaction. The boundary between biological memory and artificial systems may become increasingly blurred. In many ways, that boundary is already shifting. Digital devices now act as extensions of human memory. Smartphones, computers, and the internet allow us to offload vast amounts of information we no longer need to store internally. Psychologists refer to this as the Google effect. When we know where information can be found, the brain becomes less likely to memorize it directly. This outsourcing of memory frees cognitive space, but it may also reshape how the brain prioritizes knowledge. Some researchers suggest that modern consciousness is becoming more distributed, spread across networks of minds and machines. Memory once confined to neural tissue now exists partly outside the body, shared across devices, servers, and collective databases. Language itself may also shape the structure of conscious thought. Different languages divide and label reality in distinct ways, influencing how speakers perceive time, space, and relationships. Some languages rely on absolute directions like north and south rather than relative terms like left and right, strengthening spatial orientation. Others contain multiple words for colors that English groups together, sharpening perceptual distinctions. This idea, known as linguistic relativity, suggests that consciousness is shaped not only by what we think about, but by the mental frameworks language encourages us to use. Vocabulary, grammar, and habitual expressions subtly guide attention, categorization, and interpretation of experience. For people who speak multiple languages, consciousness may become more fluid. Many bilingual individuals report feeling slightly different depending on which language they are using, more formal in one, more emotional or expressive in another. Research supports this, showing that switching languages can alter attention patterns, decision making styles, and emotional responses. This phenomenon, called cultural frame switching, occurs because each language carries its own social norms, values, and emotional associations. Changing languages can feel like stepping into a different mental world, even while remaining the same person. Interestingly, bilingual brains may also age differently. Studies have found that people who speak two or more languages often show symptoms of dementia several years later than monolingual individuals. Managing multiple languages strengthens executive control networks in the brain, building what scientists call cognitive reserve. This reserve does not prevent dementia itself, but it can help the brain compensate for damage longer, delaying noticeable decline. It suggests that the flexibility of consciousness, its ability to switch perspectives, manage complexity, and adapt, may offer protection over time. Together, these findings paint a picture of consciousness not as a fixed entity, but as something dynamic, distributed, and deeply shaped by memory, language, technology, and social interaction. Awareness is not confined to a single moment or a single mind. It is constantly being constructed, extended, and reshaped by the systems we rely on to remember who we are and how we understand the world. The benefit appears across many forms of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, and it holds regardless of education level or cultural background. Lifelong bilingualism seems to act like sustained mental training, keeping critical neural pathways active, flexible, and resilient. While learning a second language later in life may not offer the same degree of protection, it still challenges the brain in meaningful ways, supporting long term cognitive health and adaptability. Even our silent thoughts leave a physical trace in the brain. When you speak to yourself internally, without moving your lips or making a sound, many of the same brain regions activate as when you speak out loud. Areas involved in speech planning, such as Broca's area, and regions that normally process sound, like the auditory cortex, light up during inner speech. This private narration helps guide problem solving, memory retrieval, and self control, functioning like an internal coach. Though invisible to others, inner speech is neurologically real, engaging the brain almost as if words were spoken into the air. Not everyone experiences this inner voice in the same way. While many people assume a constant internal monologue is universal, some individuals report little to no inner speech at all. Their thinking may unfold through images, abstract concepts, or subtle bodily sensations rather than words. This difference does not reflect intelligence or ability, but it does reveal how diverse conscious experience can be. People without a strong inner monologue often rely more on visual or sensory strategies for planning and remembering, finding verbal thought less natural. At the opposite end of the spectrum are those whose minds are rarely quiet. Some people experience an almost continuous stream of internal dialogue, narrating actions, replaying conversations, and analyzing events in real time. This verbal flow can support organization and reflection, but it can also fuel anxiety or rumination when it becomes excessive. Brain imaging shows that this constant inner chatter engages language related networks even during rest, particularly within the default mode network. The contrast between silent minds and endlessly verbal ones highlights how many forms consciousness can take. Mental training can reshape the brain itself. Long term meditation practice has been associated with measurable changes in brain structure. Imaging studies reveal increased thickness in regions linked to attention, emotional regulation, and body awareness, including parts of the prefrontal cortex and the insula. These physical changes may underlie the improved focus, emotional balance, and stress resilience often reported by experienced meditators. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to adapt to repeated mental habits, leaving lasting biological footprints. Meditation also alters how the brain functions at rest. The default mode network, active during mind wandering and self focused thought, tends to be overactive in states of chronic worry or rumination. Long term mindfulness practice has been shown to reduce activity in this network, shifting awareness toward present moment sensory experience. This quieting of the DMN may explain why meditation often produces a calmer, clearer state of consciousness, less dominated by repetitive internal narratives. Hypnosis offers another window into the flexibility of perception. Under hypnosis, focused attention and heightened suggestibility can dramatically alter how sensations are experienced. Pain may be reduced or reinterpreted, emotions can shift, and perceptions can change without any physical intervention. Brain imaging shows that hypnosis can dampen activity in pain processing regions, not by blocking signals entirely, but by changing how the brain interprets them. Together, these phenomena reveal a central truth. Consciousness is not fixed or uniform. It is shaped by language, memory, practice, and attention. The mind can be trained, quieted, redirected, and even reorganized, can signal us that awareness is not something we merely have, but something the brain actively creates and continuously reshapes. Under hypnosis, perception itself can change. Colors may shift, sounds may soften, pain can fade or disappear entirely. Brain scans show altered activity in regions that process sensory input and attention, suggesting that hypnosis doesn't block reality, it reshapes how reality is interpreted. Not everyone is equally susceptible, but for some, belief and focused attention are powerful enough to allow medical procedures with little or no anesthesia. It's a striking reminder that consciousness can influence experience far more deeply than we often realize. The placebo effect reveals a similar truth. When people expect a treatment to work, even if it contains no active ingredient, real changes can occur. Pain may lessen, mood may lift, the body responds. Brain imaging shows shifts in neural activity and neurotransmitter release, proving this is not imagination alone. Expectation itself becomes a biological force. Conscious belief quietly reshapes both perception and the physical state of the body. Some thinkers take this even further, suggesting that consciousness may not merely arise from the brain, but be a fundamental property of the universe, like space or time. Philosophical ideas such as panpsychism propose that all matter may possess some form of experience, however simple. Though controversial, These theories attempt to confront the deepest mystery of all, how subjective awareness emerges from physical reality. If they are correct, consciousness is not something the universe produces. It is something the universe already contains. And still, the mystery remains. Despite decades of research, no single theory fully explains how neural activity becomes the vivid inner world we experience. Scientists can map perception, memory, and decision making, yet the leap from electrical signals to awareness itself remains elusive. Consciousness research spans neuroscience, philosophy, physics, and artificial intelligence, each offering fragments of insight, but no final answer. Perhaps that is fitting. Consciousness is the study of the very thing doing the studying. And so our quiet journey through the hidden landscapes of awareness comes to an end. We've moved from the fragile spark of a thought to the vast possibility that consciousness may be woven into the fabric of reality itself. We've explored the edges where memory fades, where the self dissolves, and where awareness flickers out only to return in unexpected ways. Even now, as you rest here, your mind is still at work, breathing, sensing, gently weaving together these final impressions before letting them drift away. Your awareness may already be softening, the details blurring like a fading dream. Perhaps when you wake, you'll remember a fact or two, or perhaps they'll dissolve, leaving only a quiet sense that you've traveled somewhere vast and full of wonder. The mysteries remain. But for now, there is nothing to solve, nothing to hold. Let your thoughts slow like leaves settling on still water. The day is done. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting. But if they are closed, stay here and let sleep carry you the rest of the way.